So the truth is, if done right, rental properties can be a fantastic way to receive passive income every single month, build true wealth, and retire early. But on the flip side, if done wrong, they can turn into an ugly little monster that just sucks your time, energy, and money from you every single month. That's why today I'm going to teach you guys how to properly invest in real estate with rental properties. Stay tuned. This channel is all about helping Maryland families make smart real estate decisions. That's not just with your primary residence, but also with investment properties. I've now owned my own rental property for about 6 years, and it's worked out fantastic for me. In that time, I've built up about $90,000 worth of equity in my property, and every single month I make about $200 profit in cash flow. So in today's video, I'm going to run through some of the numbers of what makes a good rental property, what those numbers look like, and really what makes a bad rental property as well. I'm also going to give you a few of my tips of what I think is the best way to acquire your first rental property. But first, I want to give you guys the 3 ways that you actually make money with a rental property, because a lot of people don't fully understand this. So the first one is what most people are familiar with, and that's cash flow. Cash flow is the profit that you make every single month after you deduct all of your expenses from your monthly income. Now, it's important that you look at all of your expenses, not just the expenses you had that month. There are many expenses that occur on an annual basis. You need to average those out over those 12 months. There's also some other factors in there, and I'll dive a little bit deeper into those numbers later on in the video, but for right now, cash flow is the amount that you make profit every single month. The second way you make money with rental properties is through appreciation. So appreciation is how much the value of the home has appreciated since you originally purchased it. Now, on average, homes appreciate in value about 3% every single year. And that's been my experience with my property as well. I originally bought it in 2010 for $210,000. And right now I estimate it's probably worth about $275,000 if I were to sell it. So that's about $65,000 in equity I've gained through appreciation. Now, the third way that you make money with a rental property is debt paydown. So every single month when your tenants pay you and you then pay your mortgage company, you are paying down your debt. It's usually not by much, maybe a few $100s, but on a long enough time span, that can quickly add up. There's also a few tricks that you can do to really enhance this debt paydown effect, such as making an extra payment every year, or even take the money that you're cash flowing that property and put that towards paying down your debt. And that's actually what I did with this property the first few years I was renting it out. Any profit I would make off it every single month would just go towards paying down the principal on that month's payment. So I bought this house for $210,000. Currently, I owe $185,000. So passively, I've accumulated about $25,000 worth of equity just from my tenants paying down my mortgage payment. Now, it's important to know with how a 30-year amortization works is that you don't pay down much of the principal up front, but as you get into the later years of your mortgage, you actually pay down more and more of that principal. So this debt paydown effect will really accelerate the longer that you have that rental property. So through debt paydown and appreciation, I've now accumulated about $90,000 worth of equity in this property. So those are the 3 ways that you actually make a profit through a rental property. Now, there are some investors that will actually buy a home that does not cash flow anything, that every month they break completely even just so they can take advantage of the debt paydown and appreciation effect. Because if you think about it, even if you had a rental property that just broke even every single month, that's not what you want, but if you had that property broke even every single month, in 30 years, that property is going to be completely paid off. It's going to be paid off by your tenants. Plus, in 30 years, it's probably going to appreciate quite a bit in value. It may even double in value in 30 years. So even if you're not cash flowing a profit every month, it can still be a pretty good investment. So now we've gone over the 3 ways to actually make a profit through a rental property. Let's break down some of the numbers of what you should be looking for when you're trying to crunch the numbers of whether a property is going to be profitable or not. Make sure you stay tuned until the end when I share with you guys what I think is the best way for you to acquire your very first rental property and what I did personally. Let's say you find a home for sale and you're wondering if that's going to make a good rental property. Maybe it's in a good school zone, maybe it's in a good area that's really appreciating in value. So let's crunch those numbers to see if you could actually make a profit every single month. Now, it's important to know with real estate investing, you make a profit when you buy the property, not when you sell the property, not when you rent it out. It all comes down to buying a home at the right price. So the truth is, not every property makes a good rental property. The numbers just don't always add up in your favor. Somewhere around 70 to 80% of the properties that are for sale right now would actually be cash flow negative, which means you'd actually lose money every single month running those out. So it's important that you really crunch the numbers and know your numbers well, and that you buy a home at the right price. So let's say you find a property and you think it may make a good rental property. The first thing you want to do is figure out what your rent estimate is for that property. So there's a couple ways you can do this. One, if you're working with a real estate agent, they should be able to give you a rent estimate of what they think you'd be able to rent it for every month. But you can also go to sites like Zillow and look at what other similar homes in that area are currently renting for. And this will give you an idea of what you may be able to get for your property. I really recommend that you find maybe 3 or 4 similar rental properties and then average out their rents. So let's say you did this, you find some similar homes and the average rent is about $2,000 a month. So next I want you to deduct all your monthly expenses, and your biggest one's gonna be your mortgage payment every month. Now your mortgage payment is actually made up of 4 different expenses, and that's PITI: principal, interest, tax, and insurance. Now there's some calculators online that give you a rough estimate, but ideally you'd really crunch these numbers as accurately as possible. So figuring out what your principal and interest is, that's fairly easy. There's plenty of calculators that you can find online to do that. For your taxes, figure out what your property taxes are and then divide that by 12 to get what your monthly property tax expense would be. For your insurance, maybe contact your insurance agency and get an estimate of what your monthly expense would be for insurance on a rental property like this. So those 4 expenses will make up what your mortgage payment will be. So let's say your total monthly expense is going to be $1,500 a month. So right now you may be thinking, well, great, my rental income's $2,000 a month, my expenses are only $1,500 a month, that's $500 cash flow. But not so quick, there are some other expenses that you really need to calculate into this to get a much more accurate depiction of whether or not you're going to be profitable or not. So the first one you want to factor in is vacancy rate. So this is to account for the periods that you don't have a tenant in there. So really the periods between tenants. Let's say you put it up for rent and it may take you a month and a half, 2 months to actually get a tenant into this property. And let's say the tenant only stays for 12 months and then the home once again is vacant for maybe a month before you get a new tenant in there. So you really want to factor these expenses into your math when you're figuring out if a property is going to be profitable or not. Now there's no real hard rule for vacancy rate. I've had a tenant now for 5 years. My vacancy rate's been pretty low, but people recommend deducting anywhere between 3 and 10% of your monthly rental income. So let's factor in 5% for vacancy rate. And that means the property would be vacant for a little over a month every 2 years. So 5% of your $2,000 monthly income is about $100. So we're going to add $100 to your monthly expenses. So next we need to factor in what your maintenance costs on the property. Now most months your maintenance cost is going to be 0. But maybe once a year you may have some kind of maintenance issue, and really every 5 years, every 6, 7 years you may have a bigger issue like a new hot water heater, a new roof, a new furnace, these types of things. So these bigger expenses, they're called capital expenditures. So these are ones that don't occur very often, but nonetheless you want to factor these into your monthly expenses. So once again, how much you factor in for a capital expenditure kind of varies. If it's an older home built in the 1960s, then yeah, these bigger issues, they may occur more often. If it's a brand new home, you may not have to worry about that hot water heater for another 10 years. The roof may last you another 25 years. But let's throw in 10%. So we're going to factor in another 10% into our monthly expenses. So with the $2,000 a month of rental income, this comes out to an expense of $200 a month. So once again, we're going to add that $200 a month to our monthly expenses. So the last expense that we want to factor in here is property management. So if you live close by, fantastic, you can manage this property yourself if you like. If you want to hire a professional company to manage this property for you, typically they run about 10% a month of your rental income. So every single month you're giving them 10% of your rental income to manage your property. So once again, that's about $200. So let's go ahead and add that to our expenses. So now when we factor in our mortgage payment, which is a principal, interest, tax, and insurance, we factor in vacancy rate of about 5%. We factor in maintenance and capital expenditure fees of about 10%, and then we factor in a 10% fee for property management. We're left with getting $2,000 a month of rental income and having $2,000 a month worth of expenses. So we're essentially breaking even, we're neutral here. Now, if you were to manage your property yourself like I do, then you'd actually be cash flowing $200 a month instead of breaking even. So as you can see, we went from our original assumption of cash flowing $500 a month down to cash flowing maybe $200 a month or maybe even nothing every single month and just kind of breaking even. Now, if you want to make this deal stronger, you want to cash flow more, then you either need to do something to increase the rental rate or you need to purchase this property slightly less and somehow get that mortgage payment down. And that brings me into my final tip of what I think is the best possible way to acquire your very first rental property. Now, if you were to try to buy a rental property right now and you wanted to finance the whole deal and get a loan for that, Right now, you're looking at anywhere between 7, 8, 9% interest on that loan. Banks usually charge a higher interest rate for investment properties. Now, however, right now, if you were to buy a home as your primary residence, your interest rate would be anywhere between 3.75% to 4.5% for your primary residence. So that's a pretty big difference right there, and that could be the difference of a few $100s a month. And this is why I recommend buying a home as your primary residence, then moving out and turning that into a rental property. Because that low interest rate stays with the property for the lifetime on the loan. It doesn't go up when you start renting out that property. And this is what I did on my first rental property. I bought it using a VA loan, so I bought it for $0 down. I had about 3.75% interest rate on it. I then moved out and turned that into a rental property. And because I have that low interest rate, I'm actually cash flowing. If I had a higher interest rate that you typically see with a rental property of 6, 7, 8% interest, I probably wouldn't be cash flowing anything in that property. I may even be losing money on that property. If you're looking for one of the best ways to acquire your very first rental property, it's use your primary residence, move out, and turn that into a rental property. Hey, if you guys are interested in buying a home for $0 down like I did, check out my video right over here where I outline the 3 most common ways to buy a home with no money down. And if you guys are thinking about buying or selling a home here in Maryland, I'd love to have a conversation with you. Find all my contact information down in the description below or over on my website, lawsongroupmd.com.